Around MKLM's junior year, there was gonna be a homecoming dance. He wasn't really interested in dances or many activities the school had, but the theme of the dance was Masquerade. Sounded cool, but still not interesting. Then, 2 days before the dance, they got an announcement saying that anybody attending the Masquerade dance is not allowed to wear masks during the dance, just so they can identify who's who. They literally banned people wearing masks for a masquerade-themed dance. Masks being the point of having a masquerade event. The dance, as MKLM was told, was just some regular dance that had posters and covers that said, Masquerade Dance. He could just not believe the idiocy the school staff had made of themselves.
Sid used to work at a college town gas station around the corner from all the bars. They stopped selling alcohol about 1 AM, but for some reason the manager had a bunch of 30 packs sitting outside the beer cave. 3 guys walked in and went straight to the beer cave just after the bars let out at 1:30. Sid yelled to them that it's locked and he can't sell them alcohol. They ignored him and tried to open the locked doors. Sid was taking care of other customers, so he just kept watching them pulling on the doors and looking inside. Sid yelled again, but they couldn't acknowledge him. Soon they saw the 30 packs and grabbed 2 each. They got in line with Sid repeatedly telling him he couldn't sell them alcohol. They ignored him and just stayed in line. Finally, one guy got to the counter with a pack and put it on the counter. Sid looked at him directly in the eyes, and one more time he said,
"We can't sell this to you, didn't you hear us?"
The guy just shrugged and said, "We're not from Ohio, we're from California. We can still buy a beer because California's selling it." Sid stared at him and told him that's not how life works and he needs to leave. He just shrugged again and walked away with his friends.
When Pandora was 13, she was friends with some emo kids and metalheads. One time, when she was at a school dance, a mosh pit broke out on the dance floor. While this happened, Pandora and her friends were outside eating pizza and drinking Mountain Dew. Even though they were outside, nowhere near the dance floor, a teacher found them and blamed her for causing a ruckus. They said it was clearly her fault, and she was forced to clean up the gym and got a whole week of detention.
My school experience was pretty normal, but there was this one kid I remember who always freaked me out. My friends and I referred to him as the Pacing Kid. After eating lunch every day, Pacing Kid would always walk outside the cafeteria, and he would just pace and pace and pace. He would walk back and forth between a trash can and a water fountain, about a 10-foot gap if I had to guess. While pacing in this spot, he would whisper to himself quietly in words that nobody could understand, leading some to speculate that Pacing Kid was attempting to summon Satan to destroy the school. And the worst part is, in my last English class in high school, Pacing Kid sat right behind me in the very back, and even during class, his maddening whispers would continue.
Ramona and a girl she was dating at the time went on a date to a restaurant they had heard good things about. After the date, they were driving back to her house, which was about 35 minutes away. Ramona's stomach started rumbling. Apparently, something was not agreeing with her. She decided to let out a quiet fart to relieve herself, but that's when it went horribly wrong. She accidentally pooped her pants. It was the longest drive she had ever had to endure, and by the time they arrived at her apartment, her date had figured out what had happened. Luckily, they had a good laugh about it, but she will never live it down.
Ramona and her friends always did dumb stuff growing up. One night, they went on a prank run. They wore full tuxedos and gowns and went ding-dong ditching. Called as telemarketers, where they talked about feminine diapers and went around the neighborhood looking for dogs and cats their owners left outside and dressed them up in Halloween costumes. The worst was when they bought a package of condoms and filled them with lotion, Vaseline, and water. They threw them at passing cars, but one of the cars stopped right in the middle of the street. An angry man climbed out, making Ramona and her friends run back inside their apartment building and hide. They heard him pound on the door, which eventually burst open. One of Ramona's friends called 911, and luckily the man was arrested before he could find them. Since that night, they no longer play idiotic pranks, even though they laugh about it now.
What was the dumbest thing I believed when I was young? Well, quite embarrassingly, before I reached teenagehood, I was under the impression that sex was the act of just taking off all your clothes, planking on top of each other, and just waiting just waiting for something to happen. A part of me watched Dragon Ball Z and thought that some kind of fusion would take place. That maybe some chunks of skin would fall off and then form a baby. Something like that. Imagine my shock when I found out that all you have to do is push your bellies together to create babies.
When Pringle was younger, he was in love with the most popular girl in school. The trouble was that this girl had a reputation for being really mean. But on Valentine's Day, Pringle went to a ton of effort and bought her the most expensive roses, chocolates, and a card that he could afford. The next day, Pringle's crush came right up to him with a huge smile on her face. She looked at him and said, "Hey, guess what? I know who I love." Pringle got really excited and was like,
Yes! She's gonna say me!
but instead, out of nowhere, she kicked Pringle in the dick and said, "I love your disappointed face." It hurt Pringle in more ways than one. But the joke's on her because after graduation, she ended up fat and ugly and alone. That's right.
When Tolop was little, him and his brother were fighting over an apple. His brother had a knife and stabbed Tolop in his hand. At first, Tolop was laughing until he saw his bone, but his brother got scared that he was going to get in a lot of trouble. So when their mum came in, Tolop smashed a snow globe on the ground and told her that it was just glass and that he only needed a couple of stitches.
Nixiom's ex-girlfriend paid one of his friends off to essentially have him act like a spy and feed her information about what's going on in Nixiom's life. He didn't think there was much harm in it, and she'd give him like $10 a day over the course of 2 weeks. At some point, that wasn't enough for her anymore, so she offered him a larger sum to stay at his place for a weekend, with him gone for the entire duration and no questions asked. He refused that and went to confess this whole ordeal to Nixiom, providing screenshots of their messages as evidence. He also advised Nixiom to talk to the police about it. She seemed really upset and angry when he mentioned that Nixiom seemed to be fine without her. They figured she might remember that hotels exist and take a trip to his town anyway. Luckily, he never saw her again after that. A lot of kids think clouds are made of cotton candy, but Animations had an even weirder explanation. She thought that all the clouds in the sky were specifically made inside factories. Every morning she'd see white smoke coming out of the tops of factories as she was driven to school. That's where she thought the clouds came from. She even once got into an argument with her teacher about it.
One time when he was 14, Helbin drank an entire can of Palm Bay, a fruit punch tasting vodka. Within an hour, Helbin was drunk. He was so drunk that he began texting his friend song lyrics. His friend texted him back, inviting him to a party that was going on. After that, all Helbin remembered doing was leaving his bedroom and climbing into a bathroom window. He wandered into the living room of his friend's house, seeing about 50 other drunk screaming kids. Since Helbin thought the party was pretty garbage, he went to the garage and found a can of spray paint. Then he went into a bedroom and began to spray paint penises on the wall, floor, and ceiling, thinking it was his friend's room. The bedroom ended up belonging to his friend's parents. When his parents came home and noticed their son's party, they were pissed. Helbin screamed like a little girl, ran to the bathroom, and climbed out the window he had previously climbed through. The last thing he remembers from that night is trying to figure out how his doorknob worked.
After Melissa graduated from high school, she worked at Walmart to help pay for college. One evening, she had a mother in line with a young baby. After making Melissa run around to look for her missing keys, which weren't missing, she then asked Melissa to run back and get her some lemons. When she came back and was able to continue the transaction, the woman started breastfeeding her baby and continued as Melissa processed the transaction. Finally, her child spit up all over one of the carts. Nobody even bothered to clean it up. Pandora's school had some really strange rules, but one of the dumbest is 5th graders aren't allowed to get ice from the cafeteria ice machines. Even if it was the hottest day on record, only 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were allowed the privilege of using the ice machine. When Pandora asked the teacher why this stupid rule existed, the teacher told her that all 5th graders were irresponsible and would throw ice everywhere if given the chance. Pandora was so mad about this that she started a petition to get it changed. 5th graders deserve ice too, damn it! Snoopy's family went on a cruise to celebrate a family friend's birthday, and her parents were okay with Snoopy bringing her boyfriend. On the last night of the cruise, they all went to a fancy restaurant for dinner, Snoopy and her boyfriend finished early, headed back to the cabin to play games on a laptop. They got onto the elevator with another couple. The woman was clearly wasted. She said hey to them, and they said hey back to be polite. The next thing she did was look directly at Snoopy and ask, "So, you popped his cherry yet?" She apologized, saying she didn't mean to be so blunt. Snoopy was shocked and embarrassed by the question and just didn't say anything. As soon as the drunk couple got off the elevator, Snoopy and her boyfriend started laughing hysterically.
So when I was little, I used to tell my mom things like, "Mommy, when I was in heaven, I chose you to be my mom, and I chose Daddy to be my dad. I used to watch you guys in high school before you knew each other." And this used to freak my mom out a lot. In addition to that, I used to say things like, "My other mommy used to make this for me," or "My other sister used to do things like this." It used to freak my family out pretty badly. I don't remember it, but they do. I think I was just a really weird kid.
Honeybits and Ursa were on a date at Red Lobster. Ursa ordered the snow crab legs but refused to use the crab cracker that was given. Honeybits was getting annoyed seeing Ursa crack the crab legs with her teeth with this savage look in her eyes. Honeybits was about to say something, but before she could, a big chunk of crab meat came busting out of the shell and flew straight into her face. A group at the other table was watching, and they started laughing, but they were obviously trying really hard to hold it together. Honeybits didn't even like crab.
The funniest thing Zaraganba saw a stranger do was at a bar near the college he attended. Normally, that would be normal, but the man kept pointing at the air hockey table instead of the pool table. What was even funnier was that someone almost as drunk as he was took him up on it. They started using pool cues to shoot the air hockey pucks into each other's goals. Zaragamba nearly choked on his rum coke from laughing so much.
A couple of years ago, Talab's friend messaged him to ask if he could come over the next day. He said sure. However, when Talab woke up the next morning, he forgot about his friend coming over. He sat in the bed with his laptop and decided to have a little fun time. Just as he was about to finish, his friend opened up the door, beatboxing loudly and goofing around. As soon as his friend saw what Tolap was doing, he stopped for a second and said, "Nope," before beatboxing his way back out of the room. He now asks his friends to message when they're on their way over.
When Pringle was about 4 or 5 years old, he was in the car with his family who had gone on vacation. He was sitting between his older brother and sister in the back of their family station wagon, and after hearing the voices on the radio talking about a certain subject, Pringle looked at his mum with a completely straight face and asked,
Mom, am I a virgin?
His siblings cracked up laughing and his dad shouted, "I sure hope so!" His family still laughs about how innocent and awkward it was to this day.
Now, I myself don't drink, so I've never been drunk, but some of my friends, oh boy, do they love to get wasted. Now, that said, one time I was at a party with a friend of mine who got so drunk that when he decided to pass out and go to bed, he thought that a watermelon was a pillow. He grabbed it off the table, threw it onto the couch, and he slept on it. What makes this story great, though, is that during the night, the watermelon clearly got smashed, so he woke up covered in sticky watermelon juice, seeds, and the watermelon pieces were all over the host's floor. Needless to say, he was forced to clean up the mess, and I watched. It was great.
Dolan's brother, Zaraganba, once took him to a not-so-well-known Comic-Con. Dolan thought it was pretty cool since they were selling a few comics and other things. Then he saw people gathering at a stage, so he decided to join them. It turned out that Superman, or someone in cosplay, was on the stage. Dolan was excited to see him until a drunk guy jumped onto the stage and literally threw Superman off. The drunk guy then said, "You're not Superman!" That was when he stripped naked, scarring Dolan for life.
Pringle actually played a large role in the dumbest thing he'd ever seen. When he got his driver's license, his older brother came over and offered him a spin in his convertible. Pringle was so happy, he'd always wanted to drive a car with the roof down. He rushed outside and found his brother and a bunch of people sitting in the car waiting. They asked Pringle to drive them downtown, and Pringle said,
Sure.
not realizing they were up to something. When they got there, Pringle's brother and his friends put on some weird costumes. They jumped out the car, ran up to some complete strangers, and kicked them in the balls. They then jumped back in the car, laughing their asses off, and made Pringle drive away. It was the most stupid and embarrassing thing Pringle had ever seen in his whole life.
As a repetitive stress eater with AP classes, Gooby craved what some would call, quite literally, garbage. Of the weirdest things she's craved, Gooby would have to say that her Pringle chocolate kiwi was the worst. What she would do is take an unrefrigerated kiwi, cut it open, put some dark raspberry chocolate in, carved out with a spoon, and put that in the microwave for 5 seconds for some heat. After that, she would crumble up 2 or 3 salt and vinegar Pringles and sprinkle them on the chocolate, then mash it together. Honestly, that doesn't sound half bad.
Sweet Commander was a military kid, so he was constantly moving schools. When he was around 5 or 6 years old, he went to a brand new school, and one day his head started itching. He scratched it, but the teacher saw him and forced him to stand in front of the entire class while she looked for lice. The other students called him Bug Bite for 3 months until he eventually moved to a new place.
Melissa's little sister was having a birthday party once with a bunch of her friends. They asked Melissa if they could see her pet hamster. As she picked her hamster up out of its cage, one of them said, "Can the man hold her too?" Melissa's parents were out, so she asked her, "What man?" The girl replied, "The man waiting on the sofa." She immediately went to see if her parents had returned, but the whole house was empty.
When Pandora was still dating her now ex-boyfriend, she went on a road trip with his family to meet his mother's side, who were celebrating his grandfather's 15th wedding anniversary. One of the people Pandora met was his aunt, who her ex was afraid of her meeting because his aunt was bizarre and vulgar. During the visit, Pandora learned that her ex and his aunt shared the same birthday. The way her ex's aunt told her was unexpected. She said, "The best birthday gift I've ever gotten was when your boyfriend popped out of his mom's vagina." To this day, Pandora thinks that was the most awkward thing she has ever heard.
Dolan's first grade teacher was the worst. She loved every single student except him. If other students didn't turn in their work on time, they would have a chance to finish it at home. On the other hand, if Dolan didn't finish it on time, she would take his paper and pull him in front of the class, yelling at him. One day, Dolan was casually talking to his friends, and his teacher came up to him and accused him of putting gum under her desk. Dolan told her it wasn't him, and that he would find the culprit. He soon figured out that it was one of the kids who always had candy and gum, so Dolan tracked his every move. Even though he now had the evidence, he still got a 1-day suspension for lying. Dolan told his dad and mom and tried talking to the teacher, but the next day she treated him the same. During 2nd grade, Dolan still saw her in the hallways and would always glare at her. She just smiled like she hadn't done anything to him.
So when Andy was 12, she and her boyfriend Adam thought they should go on a date because they'd been dating for 10 months. Wait, 12 years old? What the fuck? Even though they've been dating for 10 months, they hadn't gone on a date before because Andy's parents didn't allow her to date. Probably because she was 12. Adam's parents, on the other hand, were totally chill with 12-year-olds dating and liked Andy. So one day, they decided to go to the park. Andy asked her dad if he could drop her off because Adam's mom was gonna do the same with him. After her dad made the mistake of dropping her off, she ran to Adam and hugged him. While they chatted, Andy noticed Adam becoming nervous with dilating pupils. Instead of looking at her, he was looking behind her. She slowly turned to look, and there was her dad in the car. Thank God! The look on his face was burned in her memory forever. After a half hour more of hanging out with each other and just running around and playing tag while taking selfies, her dad told her to get in the car because they had to go home. She ran to the car and talked to her dad through the driver's window, saying,
"But then he would be alone, and I don't want him to get hurt or anything."
After a while of convincing her dad, Andy ran to Adam and grabbed his hand. She told him that her dad was going to drop him off at his house. He texted his mom and she was okay with that. So Andy and Adam got into the car and held hands secretly as her dad drove. Her dad looked at them through the rearview mirror while heroically threatening Adam by saying, "I know where you live now. You'll be expecting me for a while. I have a rifle," and so on. Poor Adam was shaking. When they arrived at the house, he quickly kissed her cheek and ran inside. Andy's dad didn't drive home until Adam went inside. Andy was mortified and didn't talk to her dad for 2 weeks. Needless to say, Adam was scared of her brave and heroic father.
Doopy was around 5 when there was this babysitter who lived down the street from her grandma's house. This woman was pretty old, like 60. Doopy and her sister went there often, and they weren't the only kids there. The babysitter would often hit and never feed them. They would come back home with bruises and were hungry. One time, they were watching a movie, and Doopy laid down on the floor with her hands above her head. The woman managed to step on her arm and fracture it. She didn't feel it because when she did it, Doopy passed out and woke up on the couch with a cast and ice and her mom beside her. The babysitter never got in trouble, and she went back there until she moved.
When Hellbent was in 5th grade, there was a person who would always take shits in the urinals, and that person was Hellbent. He always went in the middle of classes when nobody went to the bathroom during those times, since they usually had scheduled bathroom breaks. But one day the principal had to use the bathroom and he caught Hellbent mid-shit in the urinal. Surprisingly, he didn't get any punishment. The principal just told him if he did it again, he'd get suspended.
Froggy and her boyfriend were together for 3 years before he dumped her in one of the worst ways possible. One night, they had a big fight, so Froggy went to her favorite McDonald's restaurant to cheer herself up. When she finished eating, she got into her car to leave, but saw a group of people pointing and laughing at something. Someone had graffitied the words, "Froggy, we are over, you whore!" all over the big McDonald's sign. Froggy was so pissed that she drove straight to his house, grabbed his precious Xbox, and threw it at his new BMW. There was no going back from that. They were definitely over.
When Emoji was 8 years old, he dreamt his room was slowly filling with this strange purple water. In the water, doing laps were a bunch of terrifying black crocodiles. They had red eyes, razor-sharp spikes, and they were trying to climb a ladder to Emoji's bunk bed. As the water got higher and higher, dozens of the crocodile creatures started chanting, like they were taunting Emoji to jump in. Eventually, Emoji was left with no choice. He had to dive in to escape being crushed. When he hit the water, the crocodiles pounced on him, dragging him under, ripping open his stomach. When Emoji woke up, he was shivering, covered in sweat. To this day, he's still not a fan of crocodiles, especially not black ones with evil red eyes.
When Pringle was in junior high, he got picked on every day by a mean, bigger kid. Instead of fighting back, Pringle told the vice principal about his situation. The vice principal said there wasn't anything he could do because the bullying was occurring after hours and wasn't on school grounds. Pringle was out of options, so he was forced to take matters into his own hands. He fought the kid and ended up getting suspended because apparently, the safe school policy counts until the student arrives home. The school wouldn't help Pringle when he was being bullied, but they were happy to suspend him the moment he stood up for himself. Fortunately, Pringle's parents put legal pressure on the school district and they reduced the assault charges against him to disorderly conduct and then wiped it from his record a year later.